start recording. I am streaming and recording. So you're probably starting to see me come through on the Twitch.
Let me look here. Oh yeah, that's very interesting. All right.
Are you glitching out like something crazy on the Twitch? Does it look like your videos
Oh
kind of
yeah,
like?
it's jumping all over the
Yeah,
place.
I don't know if I can do anything about that.
Oh
Okay,
well,
right.
that's okay. We
So we're live.
will we will deal with it later. This is the test run.
Yeah, absolutely. Did you? Oh yeah. So now that we are actually recording, did you want to give kind of an intro of what we're trying to do,
Oh yeah,
or?
sure. So we can send this around later. Welcome to a test run of May I Ask a Question, which is an effort to live stream some Q&A on web development topics, including front-end web development and particularly Ember.js. So we're going to go through a few different questions on Stack Overflow this morning and give some commentary along the way. So there's lots of different ways that someone can contribute to open source, and one of them is helping other people out. So let's go ahead and give it a shot.
Awesome. So, so as you said, we're kind of doing Stack Overflow and Ember stuff. Maybe we start from the scratch and kind of show where to find what I just
Yeah.
found. So the way that I do it anyway is I usually go up and click on tags, and of course there's 1.5 million tags. Well, gee, oh God, that's a lot of tags for things that are related, and obviously JavaScript super popular. But I always search this by Ember. Oh, there's an Ember data tag. I didn't know that.
Ooh.
Right. It's interesting because the two that we're looking at are Ember data related, so maybe it's a bit weird. And then I go into
Yeah, and I
Ember.js.
think Ember Data is one of those ones where, everyone is working with a slightly different backend. So there's lots of questions to be had about how to integrate those two, no matter what platform you're using.
And it's like, from my perspective anyway, it's always like, even just pointing somebody in the right direction a little bit, it's like, oh, this is how you do that thing. And then they go and look at the right part of the docs, can be really useful. Right, so here we are. We have a bunch of Ember questions. And am I right in saying that you've already selected these two questions from this list? This is how you found them.
Yeah, I find them by I search for Ember and then I look for new instead of active, newest.
Newest, okay.
Yep. Because I found that a lot of them going further back, active, already have answers, and I'm really most interested in helping out the people who haven't had much in the way of answers yet. So.
What is this? What about unanswered?
There are filters that you can use.
No answers. Oh.
Very interesting. That's helpful.
I think this is newest unanswered. Is that right? Unanswered tagged
Yep.
newest. Ooh, this is even
Great.
better. But that's got an answer. It says what?
Well, I just keep a bookmark of it and I come back to this.
Right, okay.
So I can't, who
Pro
knows what's
mode.
going on here. But
Okay.
let's go ahead and
let's go and start at the very beginning. So what's the best way to tackle this? Do we want to actually read it out, or do we want to kind of just skim it, or?
I think let's post the link to it in the Twitch chat.
I think I can do that by doing this.
I think that way if there's other people in the future who are listening along who have some answers or questions to contribute, they can actually jump straight into this.
Cool.
If they feel that our answer is insufficient,
well, they can answer themselves.
Or if they want to upvote the question or us.
Yes. Shameless plug.
And then that way people can read the question themselves. So I tend to scroll down to the very end to see exactly what is the problem that the person's having.
Okay.
How can I pass an argument to the model and edit it so that my UI gets changed as well? This is my model. I need to modify. The return works, but it's not modifiable. So The first thing that comes to mind is a lot of beginners uh, try to get and modify the results of the model directly within the route. And so we don't see that here in this example that they've posted, but if they've done something like attached a click handler and an action to a button and within the route itself and tried to get the model and set something, that's going to fail. Because within the route JavaScript itself, the model, what is referred to as model, is a function. It's not actually the records that come back. So the thing that has access to the records returned by the model hook is the controller. And then if you've passed the model and actions down to, components or something like that, then they can do this.get model.set something. That's my suspicion. What do you
Well,
think's going on?
well, I think you said a few things that are very important there. So it looks like, do we have a name here? Do we have a name? Amazing day today.
Amazing. Yeah, it is an amazing
It
day
is
today.
amazing today. It's very sunny outside of here in lovely Ireland. Um, okay, so it looks like Amazing Day Today has noticed what you said about accessing things in the controller,
Yeah.
but it seems like they've missed a trick just very slightly. I'll have to I'll have to have a look at what they're trying to do with this like filter by whatever, because that's actually making me think about actually showing the true filtering possibilities in uh, is it controllers that do filters, or is it a it's a computed filter?
Controllers, you can put filters on the
Yeah.
controller as well. You can
So,
put them on the model. You can put lots of places.
but it looks here like they're going this.get store.query inside a controller instead of using what was returned from the model. See what I mean?
Yep, I do.
So let's see exactly what they're trying to achieve. So you're saying they're trying to edit something. My suspicion is that they don't actually want to edit the model. I think they want
Okay.
I think they want to filter based on something. So it's like actions filter by test. If
Need to
param
filter
equals past name
model.
param.
Right.
So they want when they click filter by test and send it a test name, let's say, test name param, they want these tests to be only the ones that have that name. I
Okay.
think.
I see. I see.
So this can be a lot simpler, I think.
Okay.
Um, oh, I never told you about this. I had an idea.
Uh-huh.
Instead of having like just trying to answer this question in kind of in code on Stack Overflow, I thought maybe we could have an actual Ember app.
Yeah, I was thinking that or Twiddle, depending
Oh, Twiddle.
depending on what the thing is. So this one would be easier as an actual Ember app because uh, you know, if we were going to make a full example, we would use Mirage and things like that to stub the records.
Okay.
And then for smaller UI bugs and things, we could do it on Twiddle.
Okay. Okay. Cool. Yeah,
So.
because that's another thing that I wasn't necessarily considering. It's like, are we going to go full on Mirage here?
Well, I mean, I suppose we don't really need to, uh, but I think perhaps we could set up a demo app that does that.
Yeah, well,
Um,
it might be sensible to do it with Mirage because they're specifically asking about the store. So
right,
it might be a
right.
good kind of like intro as well to the kind of, how do I test this without having an actual API? I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't
yeah.
know if that's
Or
kind
you
of.
can always just do the create. I sometimes put a create record in there, but
Oh,
then you have to make a model and everything. So, if you want to give a shot at setting that up real quick,
okay.
I can talk about Mirage.
What would your theories be on this setting this up real quick? What's the quickest way, do you think?
I would probably just use the application route. Although, if we're sort of doing this week by week, it might actually be cool to keep an app or keep a running examples app, depending. But
Oh,
I would probably just put it in application for
okay,
today.
cool. So,
Um, and then let's maybe we could skip Mirage, just have the model hook or after model or something make a record. So we'll need a route. We'll need uh, we'll need a controller. And we'll need a model in order to create something and throw it into the store. And what we're using here, so Ember CLI. Oh yeah, I think it comes by default with application. So Ember CLI lets you create files, and I can say that it's very important, even once you're familiar with Ember, to always use the CLI to create your files, because some of the worst bugs that I've ever faced had to do with naming problems or putting things in the wrong folder. You can get into some really strange situations, especially with nested routing, if you're not using the CLI to generate your routes and components and whatnot.
just thinking if I'm actually going to be doing it here, we're obscuring what I'm actually typing on this stream. So what I just typed there out of interest is I typed Ember G root application. So it asked me then if I wanted to overwrite application HBS, because this was just essentially a automatically generated application. So when you automatically generate an application using the Ember CLI, it gives you this kind of welcome page, which is just like our little Tomster waving at you, saying hi. So I just removed that, might as well. And by generating the application route, it's given us the things that we were talking about. The route itself, which is in app routes application.js, which is where we're going to do the store lookup, and then it gave us a new application HBS. Sorry to cut across you there.
No, it's good. And when we were discussing Mirage earlier, Mirage is a library that it mocks. It creates a mock environment for your API requests. So, making GET requests, patch, delete, whatever, it can kind of stand in as a test API, so that in order to build and develop a front-end application, you don't have to have built the backend first. You don't have to be running it. You can be using sort of this simulated backend and build out everything just as you would if it was live. And what that lets you do is, once it's time to connect something up to the backend, you can just swap it out, which is really cool.
Also just made this super large for our stream.
Yeah, sounds good.
So interestingly, even though I generated the application route a second ago, route, translation.
Same difference.
Same difference.
They're both here.
The controller isn't often generated automatically when you're generating a route. So you sometimes don't need them, or you don't need to define them. It gives you a default one if you don't have the file in your Ember application. So what we are actually looking for is we need to kind of recreate this what was his name again, or their name again?
Amazing day today.
Oh, this is so great. This is perfect. So I'm trying to recreate the same action that they were trying to do, or what it seems like, and then we can make it work the way that we were hoping to. So I'm not entirely sure what that's going to do. And also, let's beautify that, because it's a little bit...
Yeah. Ugh. It looks like we need a test. Did you make a test model? We need a model called test.
No, I do not. Ember G model test. Magic.
And I think we'll want to swap out the query for a peak record, maybe? Will that... oh no, I suppose if we make the model first, it should find it in there.
Okay,
cool.
So how do we make some of these models in the kind of like really quick way? What's the quickest way to get a bunch of models in the system?
I usually cheat and make them in the model hook
So
if I need to do something real fast.
you kind of
You
like
know,
make them here.
yep, yep.
I'm just going to
What
do a
this
little.
this I would say make a record. I find that it's a little confusing the difference between models and records, especially for beginners. So, when I think of the model, I could be referring to kind of the schema for how my data and my app should look. I could be referring to the special function, the model hook that runs when you enter automatically when you enter a route, or like some people when they say the model, they mean the records that have been fetched. But I like to say records. All right.
Face. I always have a face in all of my test strings, just for some strange reason. And last test. So, okay. How do you create those records out of interest? I imagine the context
What
was 100%.
this dot. Let's see. Can I
So
do this so infrequently? This dot store dot create. Is it store dot create record? This
Just-
dot create record. I don't remember.
anybody who is listening to this, we may be expert Ember developers, but every 5 minutes we're always looking up things.
Beat prayers.
So it's like you don't have to keep it all in your head. You don't have to pretend like we don't pretend like we know everything. We always look these things up. And
All right. So I'm looking at I like the explanation in the guides the best.
do you want me to bring that up on the video?
Let's see. Yeah, it's here,
Well, let's copy paste it
I'll
because it
put
works.
the link. Yep. Where did I'll put it in the Twitch chat.
Oh,
in
you
just
can't
a
do that
moment.
as well as.
So this is where I go when I'm trying to remember what to do with records. So one of the things I like about Ember is that I don't actually frequently have to mess with things related to my API. I kind of just write the code once, set it up, and then leave it alone. And most of the rest of my work is in, making the UI do awesome things. All right, so we've
this
got.
one, isn't
Yeah, this dot
copy
get store dot create record.
Okay, so what I'm gonna do is with their test is the type of record that we're trying to do, and then we're trying to create one with the name that we're passing in. Now, just changing this so it makes sense.
Yeah.
For anybody who's not familiar with this is the what is it, ES 2016 or whatever the new name we should be calling these things, ES6 way of just doing name. So having it as like a shorthand method like that just is the exact same as doing name : name. Right, so that's that. I'm going to drop this in here because otherwise it's going to freak out. This. Now the
and do we, since this is an Ember 3 app, is that right?
That's correct.
So we don't need to get the store, do we? Or like we don't need to import the store, do we?
I think so.
Okay, it's automatically available in the route. It should be.
The only thing that
my own app is 2.16, so.
The only thing that I would say is that we need to await these things because they need to be created.
Okay.
I think.
All right.
I'm not entirely sure, but we'll see.
Let's run it and check the store. Oh, I didn't know you could npm start. I've always typed Ember serve.
Yeah, I'm.
Interesting.
This is the whole thing. I'm not a Ruby guy. I'm really a Node developer. So I'm coming to Ember as a Node developer. So I just do things the Node way. And like npm start is kind of, you usually
Yeah.
have a script where you can just run npm start and it runs the app,
Yeah.
which is pretty cool.
All right.
While it's doing that, I was thinking about it. By the way, my computer is freaking out right now because there's so much going
Oh, jeez.
on.
Well,
I'm going to
by
just...
the way, I have 15 minutes left before I have to run back off
That's
to
fine.
my day job, but I think we can
I think it means we
roll
get
through
one
this pretty
thing
quickly.
done today, which is good. One is a good test case.
Great.
That was a bad idea. It seems Ember serving when you're
There we go.
live streaming is a difficult one.
I quit all of the applications that I could before we started this live stream. I quit Docker. I can't quit Slack because we're actively using it right now. Can't quit Chrome. Those are the biggest. Those are the biggest ones. Okay, so I think what we're seeing here is, because are we doing a query for any records anywhere in the model
we
hook?
might be, actually.
So let's do peek all, this.getStore.peek all in that model hook. So the difference between peek all and find all is that find all will make an API request. Peek all will only grab what's in the store. What's that about? Unexpected token in JSON at position 0. That's...
I don't think that's what we're expecting.
No.
Oh, it's still trying to get tests.
It's still trying to make a GET request there. Why?
Is it because of this? Because we're saving it?
yeah, get rid of the save.
Oh, so we don't need to save.
So you don't need the save for it to go into the store.
Ah, okay. Well, I learned something new. And because we're not saving, we don't need this to be a async await.
That's right.
Function. So that's just creating them in memory, essentially.
Yeah. Let's try that now. All right.
Oh, yes.
Fantastic. So can you look at the Ember inspector?
Ooh, the Ember inspector.
Pull that up for a minute. So a lot of times, it'll say something doesn't render, and you're like, what's going on? Like, where are my records? I have used the data tab more than anything else when I'm first getting my app started up. And so this is a good way to see, like, is the problem that I'm not setting the values of something? Has anything been created in the store at all? Like, what's going on? And whenever you've created but not saved a record, the ID is always going to be null, because it's the job of the backend to set the IDs. Okay, so that's good. We've created that. So now we can create the filter, I guess.
Yeah, so what I'm thinking that, I keep forgetting the name, Amazing Day Today, is trying to do, seems like, let's go and look, because I've actually copied across the action. So what it looks like here is they're trying to have an action in a button somewhere that passes a parameter, and if that parameter is an empty string, we go down here and we just get all of the tests. Okay, that's I'm not entirely sure what this past is about, but we'll get there in a second. And then otherwise, if the param is not an empty string, we query name param. So we want to show only tests that have the name of param. Does that make sense?
Yeah, whatever is passed in an argument.
So what I'll do to kind of make this a little bit more sensible, in our little application, I'm going to duplicate some of these, because essentially what it seems to be suggesting is that there's more than one test with the same name, because it's looking for equals to instead of contains. Okay, so again, we're trying to work backwards here, so we're not entirely sure what we're trying to do. But let's say, for example, we created a button that had an action. And what was our name of our action again?
Oh, I
Filter
don't
by
remember.
test. I'm going to change this because it's filter by test doesn't kind of communicate what the action is trying to do. So we're trying to say filter by test name, which I think kind of gives us a hint, future us a hint that when we come back to this in 20 days or whatever, we'll know what it's trying to do. And this is not the best structure for this stuff, but what I'm thinking, it'll make sense. First test. First test.
Yeah.
First.
Yep. That's what I would do. I've found that when I'm trying to answer Stack Overflow questions, or, more often I help with questions on the Ember community Slack in the help channel, a lot of times I do have to try to recreate whatever the user has been doing in order to really understand the problem. And when I was first getting started in Ember, if someone posted a question that I felt like I ought to know the answer to, or that I would need to be able to do in the future, I would try to give it a shot. And for a long time, I just lurked and attempted to answer people's questions, but then usually didn't come to an answer uh, and wouldn't say anything. And then later, when someone did chime in with the answer, that was sort of, an important learning moment. And every once in a while, I would come up with something. All right, what do we got? Nothing.
My
Oh, it's
computer is
building.
freaking out.
Sure.
I think it's actually built, but my computer is just completely freaking out. This is what you get for running Ember Serve and hosting on Twitch.
Is there
and
nothing on the waiting for localhost? Isn't
Yeah.
that odd? Nothing in the console, huh?
So I might kill it and try it again.
Sure.
While we're waiting on this,
Oh yeah, it might have had a hard time watching for file changes
oh, that's a good point.
because I found that can be pretty tough when you're reaching your memory limits.
Yeah, anybody? Well, I'm not entirely sure what limits I'm reaching at the moment, but it's
I think you're probably completely maxed out your
on
poor
everything.
computer.
Yeah, poor thing. Yeah.
Oh no, I think we'll have to buy gaming PCs, Chris. Whatever shall we do?
Such a shame. Such a shame. I think it's actually Chrome that's freaking out here. So I'm gonna kill. Yeah, look.
Oh yeah, look at that. You killed Chrome. Congratulations.
Yes.
That's great.
Yeah. I'm having a weird day. I was actually able to. I got a segmentation fault on Node today as well, and I'm like,
Ooh, that's nice.
What am I doing? Let's see if I can get this.
I've been getting an error lately on my Mac about file table overflow, maximum number of open files reached. I've got some work to do there. There was a couple weeks ago, I was working on something and I was continuously doing an infinite loop. Like every time, this wasn't an Ember app. I was infinitely looping something in Chrome, working on a little like vanilla JavaScript sort of thingy. And I killed my browser and had to restart my computer like 6 times that day.
Oh, God.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Every time I thought I had it, I was like, all right, Jen, don't write an infinite loop. I was wrong. Well, so Chris, I do have to go soon.
That's okay.
So maybe we can finish. We'll finish up if you finish up the example, then maybe over Slack, we can get an answer down for this person now that we've talked about their question for a long time. And yeah.
Ooh. So. What I
or
could,
you can keep going. That's another option. You don't necessarily need me here.
This is so funny. I have a designer friend that anytime I put a BR in HTML, he would just freak out at me, and it's like, you shouldn't be using BRs.
You know what? MVP.
Yeah, exactly. Use what you need to use. I'll keep going
All
to
right.
just get it to work the way I want it to work, and then
Yeah.
we can review what I was able to achieve, and
Yeah.
then we can write the
And
answer.
I'll upvote it.
Yeah,
But I won't serially upvote all your answers, or Stack Overflow will take them all away again.
exactly.
I've learned that the hard way.
I know.
Anyway, I will catch you sometime later. This was fun.
Yes, it was fun.
All right.
Until next
Bye.
time. Bye bye. Ooh. Then there was one. Let me see if I can turn this off. Video capture device. Window capture. There we go. So it's just me. Right. Okay, so where were we? The plan was that we were going to... Yes, so we're going to have these three buttons, and essentially what they're going to do is they're going to call that filter by test name, which I think we updated, filter by test name, and it's going to pass in this parameter into that first parameter. And we're going to then do what we want to do. We're going to try and achieve what we think Amazing Day Today was trying to achieve, but using this kind of structure. Okay. So right. So the thing that I usually do in this case, it would have been useful to actually talk to Jen about this one to see what her approach to this exact problem is. But the thing that I tend to do here is I tend to have this idea of, instead of using the model directly, because we're in a controller here, just to double check, yeah, so because when we're in a template, this is referring to, we can use things directly on the controller here, and essentially model is kind of set on the controller when it's returned from the root. What I tend to do is kind of use the controller as a little bit of as a middleman for filters and things like that. So instead of saying model, I do something like filtered model. That's going to break, or it's going to do nothing. Oh, I also tend to have this pinned as the first one, just so that I can always get back to it with command 1. Filtered model doesn't exist yet on the controller, so it's returning nothing, so it's looping over exactly nothing, and we're getting none of the tests out. So in the controller, what we're going to do now is we're going to filter. We're going to use computed filter, I think, on this. So what do I mean by computed filter? So I'm going to go straight to the Ember.js API documentation, emberjs.com API, and I'm going to search for, am I going to search for it? No, actually I'm going to hopefully, no, it's not on there. Oh, it is, object computed, yes. So this is a recent thing on the API where when you get to the homepage, and actually Jen was one of the people working on this, when you get to the homepage you kind of get a documentation about what the API is trying to achieve, and also gives you a commonly searched documentation, and one of the ones that we're looking for today is this computed macro. I think the one that we're looking for here is filter. Oh, this is great. So there's two here. Oh, great. So there's two variants of this. There's filter and there's filter by. Now, the way that I usually try to think of this is the one that has is just filter is usually a little bit more complex. So as you can see here, the way that you use filters, you pass it a function, and then you have to you have to do the work to actually filter the records yourself. But down here, if you look at the filter by, this is a much simpler example, because the filter by actually does the work for you. Filters the array by the property and the value. Okay, let's see if we can figure out what that means. So, first things first, we're going to copy the import. And then we're going to copy this, which is, it's not remaining shores, it's filtered model. And we're going to filter by, and let's see what it says here. It's giving us a, oh, here we go, dependent key, property key, and value. Okay. I don't know if we can do this. And the reason why I don't think we can do this is because the value that we're looking for has to be dynamic. Right, okay. I'm gonna jump out of that. We're gonna change it back to the other way. So if you find the kind of helpful one that's kind of doing a lot of the work for you isn't quite what you need, it's then useful to kind of fall back, as it were, to the more generic one, and then you have to do the work, but at least you're actually able to get things done the way you need them. So, filter model. Filter. What are we being passed here? We're being passed dependent key. So the thing that it is actually dependent on, and in this case, it's model. And what is actually being passed into filter is this callback. The callback method you provide should have the following signature: item, the current item in the iteration, index, and then the array. Now this is interesting because, as you can see here, it's not using index or array. So you don't actually need to provide those. So essentially what we're doing, and that's what this is complaining about here, if you see my ESLint is actually going nuts. Array is never being used. And then when you remove that, index is never being used. So the thing that we're trying to do, in this case it's a test, the thing that we're trying to do is we're trying to filter this model based on the value of the test. Now, there's two things here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with a default value of filter value. I'm making up a name here. Filter value. And it's going to be empty. I know that's kind of the structure that we're doing here. So what we're trying to do is, if this dot filter value is empty, return true. Now, why am I returning true? Let's go back here and have a look. It does not actually say in the filter documentation, filter the array by the callback. What this is actually doing, and this is the same as kind of the basic JavaScript filter function, it's actually limiting the model array based on all of the individual tests, and if we return true from this function, it'll include it in the resulting array. So because it's empty here in this case, we are going to return true, because when we don't have a filter value defined, we want to see everything. And then otherwise, we want otherwise, as in if filter value is anything but empty, if test.name is equal to this dot filter value, return true. Now, this one's a little bit weird, and I will get back to that in a second, but I want to get this to work before we come back and clean it up. Okay, so we've got some improvements. Because we haven't defined a filter value is empty. We're now returning all of the models that we had already in the filtered models. So let's try some of these buttons that we created. Oh, it's not working. Why is it not working? Ah, this is interesting. We're not just dependent on the model. Let's go back here and have a look. Filter. Filter. Dependent key. I'm wondering if we're able to do this. Let me just check if this works before I explain what I just did. Console. That's interesting. You can't have multiple dependent values. Okay, there's a lot going here. There's a lot going on here. Okay, so let me move on to the next part of the implementation, and then we'll loop back around and see if we can improve this in any way. So first things first. We need to actually implement this action. So as we were kind of seeing before, we want to filter by test name. And as we're kind of trying to set this up, what we're really trying to do in this action is we want to set the filter value to be the parameter that's being passed in. So in this case, it's going to be name. So all you need to do is actually this dot set filter value to be name. Let's see if that does what we need to do. Okay, there's a lot going on here. Okay, so remember what I said before about starting at the kind of helpful version of the function, and then kind of moving into the more generic version as we go along. As it turns out, this filter I don't think is going to be able to solve our problem. What we really need is just to do the computed thing ourselves. And the way the computed works, which we can see, is it defined here? Computed. Oh, this is interesting because I think computed is actually on object instead of, yeah. So the way that computed works is that you can define multiple dependent keys. And that's what we really need. So we're going to do computed filter value, and it's also dependent on model, but not just model, it's model.each.name. So it's dependent on every one of the model's names. So if they changed, then this would update. Okay, so if filter value is empty, return true. Okay. So we're no longer in the situation where we're being passed in each of the tests one by one. We're now having, oh, and that's why it wasn't working a second ago. We now have to go and get the model. So this return this dot model dot filter, and this is test. So we're going to have to go and get the model and filter it And it's again the same sort of structure here. So let's see if this works. Oh, that's looking promising. That's looking very promising. Oh, that's nice. Okay, so we've got some stuff happening, but something else is happening. So test. First test. Oh, I wanted it to be face. That's what my examples are always there for. Face. So we're gonna face. Oh, first test. Clear. Nice. Okay, so let's go back and have a look and see if we can actually understand what's going on. So we were attempting to start with filter by, which wasn't what we needed because we needed to get the filter value by reference instead of it being fixed. So we couldn't do that. We then tried filter and it wasn't enough because we weren't able to provide more than one dependent key. So we had to go down to the more generic version again, which is computed. So we had to do all of the work ourselves. What else is happening here? So what we're trying to return from computed in this case, and computed, let's see if it does a good definition here. This helper returns a new property descriptor that wraps the past computed property function. Define properties with Nixon's fire. Ooh, that's interesting. If you pass this function, I'm wondering if the guides would be better at defining what this computed. Let's see. Computed properties, rightio. So this is in the guides. Aha. What are computed properties? So if anybody wants this is kind of defining what a computed property is. And let's see what it says. In a nutshell, computed properties let you declare functions as properties. So you create one by defining a computed property as a function, which Ember will automatically call when you ask for that property. And then you'll be able to use this as you would any normal static property. So essentially, this is what I was saying earlier on. Because we're asking in the template for filtered model, and it's expecting it to be an array because we're eaching over it. Essentially what we need to do is we need to return an array from the computed property. Now, I'm not sure I like this kind of structure here because really we don't need to filter model if filter value is empty. So what we would do instead of doing this in here is we would put it as the very first thing here. And instead of returning true, because we're not in a filter anymore, we're just returning model. Oh, this dot model. My bad. So what this is telling me is that if we don't have a filter value, we're not doing anything to model. If we're thinking of this filtered model as a middleman, we're just passing it through. We're doing nothing to it, we're just passing it straight through. So we do nothing in this case. Now, in this case, we only get this far because there's a return here. We only get this far if filter value is not empty. Now, there's something that's wrong here that you need to be very careful of. And we can search for it in here because I think we can. Is empty utils. So there's a problem with searching for this because what you usually do, instead of kind of defining it as empty to start off with, you kind of don't define it at all. And if we save that, we'll see that the app is now breaking because filter value is actually undefined in this context, but it is empty, as in undefined. It's what we might think of as empty, but it's not exactly equal to the empty string. So there's a lot of kind of weird stuff around what empty actually means in terms of JavaScript, but what you tend to find in a kind of helper methods are these things like this. So you have like a function that helps you to know if something is empty. And if you put that into the code, it reads really well as well, which I really quite like. So if this.filter value is empty, then do nothing. Just pass the model through. And we'll see that that's working as expected. So that's one thing. The second thing that we can do here is we can kind of simplify this. Now, for somebody who's more of a beginner, I would stop here. I wouldn't change anything because this is now a fully working, hopefully what, oh God, I forgot my name again. Hopefully what Amazing Day Today was trying to achieve. This is a fully working implementation. But I'm, as I kind of said earlier on, I'm a bit of a node perfectionist, so I like things to be nice and neat and tidy. So first things first, if you're doing something where you're doing an if something is true, return true, you don't need to do that at all. You can just return this straight away. And the reason why you can do that is, let's kind of walk our way to it. So instead of having this check inside inside the if, we'll set it as a variable. Let result equal blah. And then it's if result equals true, return true. Okay, that's a bit funky because actually we don't need if result equals true because that's just how ifs actually work. So if this is true, return true, which is the same as saying return result because it is true at the time. So that means that we can just get rid of all of this and much simpler return that. Now, in ES6, you have a very nice way of defining this sort of a function really quickly. If you don't have these curly brackets, the value that's on the right hand side of the arrow function is implicitly returned, which means that you can write something like this. And it takes a little bit of time to get used to, but when you go from having multiple lines, like what we had a second ago, multiple lines down to having one line that defines exactly what we're doing here. So we're filtering, and this is the thing that we're filtering by. The name is the same as filter value. Then your mind gets used to this, and it looks very nice and it's very helpful. So I think with those two little additions, we are now done. We have a filter. We have buttons that set the filter, and then we have this kind of middleman ideas, this kind of proxy, or whatever the word is, helps you describe this the best. This man in the middle that's doing something to the model before we're actually sending it straight to the template. I think that is it. And it all works. Okay, I think I'm going to call it there for a day, and I hope you enjoyed this.